I'm Dave Haynes. I'm the editorial page editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and we're joined today by former Congressman Mark Neumann, who's running for the U.S. Senate in the Republican primary next week. Congressman, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I wonder if we could just start sort of a question about endorsements. Governor Scott Walker said last week that he might, in fact, change his mind and recommend a candidate in this race. And then he said a lot of nice things about Governor Thompson. Now, he hasn't given any indication that he might be leaning that direction yet. But two questions. One, if he did recommend one of your opponents, what effect might that have on your campaign? And two, have you asked for the governor's blessing?
Well, first, I don't want to deal with hypotheticals because I think we'd have to actually see it happen, and I don't expect that to happen for whatever it's worth it, but that's the governor's decision.
You don't expect the governor to recommend?
That's his decision. I sure don't want to put words in his mouth. I have a great deal of respect. I think Scott Walker's done a phenomenal job as our governor. To be honest with you, if I would have known what a great job Scott Walker was going to do, I would have never run against him in the first place. So I'm very happy with what Scott Walker is doing. I think he's a great governor.
Have you asked the governor to endorse him?
I'm sure we have over the course of time. I think I probably did way back when, because I usually say to everyone, I'll ask you all too, so I don't forget, we would like your endorsement, so consider yourselves formally asked. So I say that a lot though out on the trail, and if I hesitate, it's only because I don't recall if I said it specifically to him or not, but I probably did. I'd say it to most people.
Okay.
We do have a significant list of endorsements though that I think are very important. I think the Tea Party Express endorsement last Friday was an extremely important and significant event for this campaign. I think the Tea Party Express tour that we're now going to do all over the state will be very helpful in turning out the grassroots. But it's not just that, it's also Senator DeMint, Rand Paul, Tom Coburn, Mike Lee, Pat Toomey, Club for Growth, Concerned Women of America, Citizens United. The list of conservative organizations endorsing our campaign has been very, very helpful. Every one of those groups and every one of those senators has a following here in Wisconsin. And in terms of having our grassroots network work, it's a very important part of it. Those endorsements are very important.
I'd like to have each of the members of the editorial board and reporters introduce themselves before they ask their questions. So James, we'll go to you next.
James Causey, editorial writer, columnist, and blogger. In light of yesterday's shooting in Oak Creek and the shooting in Colorado, do you think there needs to be any changes in the national gun laws?
Well, I think both of those incidents, as well as several others that have occurred over the last 12 to 14 months, is an indication that there is something seriously wrong in America. I think it's important to note that they are clearly in violation of the laws on the books, and I'm not sure more laws are the right answer. I think we've got to look at fundamentally what's wrong in this country. And I think that goes to, everybody talks about the debt and the deficit, but I think it goes to the attitudes that are created by the loss of hope because of the debt and because of the deficit, and the loss of hope that they can get a better job for themselves and their family. It's why we need Mitt Romney as president. It's why we need a conservative United States senator to join Ron Johnson so we can turn this country around and restore hope for people.
What about banning extended clips or large magazines?
And we should point out that there's no evidence yet that those were used in this shooting, but
Right,
there was in the Colorado shooting some evidence.
I answer a lot of questions, and one of the reasons that the Tea Party has endorsed us is that I do refer to the Constitution on a regular basis. So our Second Amendment to our Constitution guarantees the right to bear arms, and I'd be very reluctant to do anything that was in conflict with the Second Amendment to the Constitution.
What we do know is that the shooter was apparently issued a gun permit in North Carolina in 2008. Does that give you any cause for concern for concealed carry laws?
Again, I go back to this man is in clear violation of the law, and what you're asking me is if we have different laws, is it somehow going to fix the problem? Different laws aren't going to fix the problem. He is clearly in violation of the laws that we have, as was the Colorado shooter, and I can go back to Arizona if you want to go back a year and some of the travesties that have happened. Something is wrong in America when you look at what's happening in our country. And I think we need to turn this country around so we restore hope for our families.
Lee, you want to talk to?
Hi, good to see you again. Lee Bergquist.
Small world.
Yeah, small world. Lee Bergquist, political writer, environmental writer, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Last week, former Governor Thompson came in, and we covered the waterfront, but one of the questions we asked him about the race is whether he was going to put some of a considerable amount of his own money into the race. And he kind of demurred on that point. You put a lot of money into your race the first time around, And that hasn't been the case as much in this race. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought to, given where the polls are right now, how close you are in this primary, that whether you're going to put significantly more capital into the final week of this race.
Well, the bottom line is, in this race, we have a very large number of grassroots supporters that have contributed to the campaign. We probably are over 30,000 contributions to our campaign at this point in time, and I'm happy to say that we've raised the vast majority of the money that we need to run the race. But I will also tell you that we will do what's necessary to the best of our God-given ability to see this thing through in the last weeks of the race.
Have you put in money that maybe I haven't caught up with the FEC yet, or that you put in?
We have put in some recently, and again, we are going to make sure that we communicate a conservative message across the state of Wisconsin, and we will do anything within our God-given ability to make sure that that happens.
Could you say what we're talking about, how much we're talking about here?
I don't know without actually, I honestly don't know without going back and looking at exactly.
But
what it
more
is.
than $1 million?
Oh, no.
Less than
No.
that?
I don't want to give you a number, because if I do and I go back and check and it's different, I don't want to give you something that's not right.
Okay.
Governor Thompson also indicated that fundraising, at least for his campaign, had been harder than it might have been in the past. He said that had to do with the recall election and people just sort of being tapped out. Have you found that to be the case?
Again, I don't know what Tommy thinks, but as far as we're concerned, it's gone very well. And we have raised more money than I honestly believe we could, because the conservative message of balancing the budget, repealing Obamacare, has brought many supporters into our camp. And they know we're serious about it. I mean, the bottom line on this whole thing is they know we are dead serious when we say we're going to balance the budget, because we've done it before. I understand that joining Ron Johnson's going to be, going out there and getting in this battle. I understand how difficult it's going to be. But I also probably am one of the few people in the entire country that understand it can be done. And because I lived through these wars before, and we got it done.
I'm Marty Kaiser, the editor of the Journal Sentinel. Thank you for coming in today. Several Republican members of Congress have really broken with tradition in the last couple of weeks, criticizing their own party for refusal to compromise. And they're saying it's hurting the ability of Congress to govern. One of those Republicans was Representative LaTourette of Ohio, and he recalled receiving a phone call after he and Jim Cooper of Tennessee proposed legislation that would enact the Simpson-Bowles reduction plan. And as you know, that involved some tax cuts, cutting the deficit by $4 trillion. And you know that Grover Norquist has been very critical of that bipartisan effort. Now nearly every Republican in Congress, and almost all Republican candidates, including Mitt Romney, have signed the pledge of Grover Norquist to not raise taxes. And now some Republicans say that the reason Congress cannot pass that grand bargain of the Simpson-Bowles last year is because they wouldn't compromise. And now we have this fiscal cliff. We had stories today about business leaders saying it's already hurting the economy. You're a candidate of the Tea Party, which has been purging what it calls moderate Republicans, both in 2010 and 2012. So one of your opponents, Tommy Thompson, has this reputation of a pragmatist who's worked with Democrats in the past. Wouldn't it be good to have a U.S. Senator who has a reputation of being a pragmatist and not being an ideologue?
Where to begin? Wouldn't it be great to have a United States Senator who has been in the battles before, inherited a massive deficit and growing debts like we have today, and been one of the principal architects of the plans that led to a balanced budget, not through higher taxes, in fact, along with some very substantial tax cuts. When it comes to the art of compromise and getting along, I would first point out that back in the 90s, when we got the budget balanced, we had a Democrat president, and we had Newt Gingrich, and they were fairly far apart in terms of their views on how the country should be governed, and we did get the job done. In fact, we balanced the budget, we cut taxes, and restored our economy. But I want to be a little more specific, and I'm not going to...
So these Republicans that are saying that Republicans that are angry and the way they're conducting themselves are wrong.
Let me suggest to you that there are places where we can compromise and there are places we cannot compromise. And again, I'm not going to walk through what this page is. It's the numbers that show us how to get to a balanced budget. Our budget plan literally has the numbers written. This is how much we can spend each year. And if we stay in those spending parameters, it's highly likely we're going to balance the budget inside of 5 years. Okay? I would not compromise on that. That would be a fundamental principle.
Mark, what's your percent of GDP that you'd be willing to go up to?
We lock it at about 18
about
after
18,
the fact.
okay.
Yeah. But
In
I wanted,
perpetuity, or is there some leeway?
we
in that
actually
going
do just a
forward?
hair under that, and then we
Okay.
tie it to the growth in GDP on a longer term.
Okay.
That's how, remember, our plan goes
Yep.
to the next step. We sidetracked here, but the next step
Yeah.
is, after we get to balance, we still have a massive debt hanging over our head. So we have laid out a plan to pay off the debt, much like my home buyers pay off a 30-year
Okay,
mortgage.
sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
The compromise question, though, is a key question in understanding what happened when I was in Congress in the 90s and how I think we can get the job done again. We don't compromise on the numbers. We don't compromise on the amount of money that we allow to be spent. The way you still get the job done is if somebody wants a different, this is my list of 150 specific line item entries that we have laid out. If somebody comes to me and says, Mark, number 5 on that list, that's really an important program and here's why. And here's another program that's less important that we can do instead. That's my idea of working across the aisle and working where we have to get the job done. So would I be willing to have a different budget cut than what I'm on my 150 and still obtain my numbers? Absolutely. But that's how you get the job done. You have to be in a debate about the priority of spending in government with a finite number in place as to how far you're willing to go. And I would suggest to you that that is exactly what your business does here at the paper, and it's probably exactly what you do in your families, because you have a finite number of dollars available to spend, and you go out and get the stuff that's absolutely necessary, and then you have a debate of what's over the highest priority left for you to do with the dollars that you have left. I mean, isn't that how a family or a business works in America? It is.
On the, back on Simpson Bowles for a minute, I may be wrong about this, but I think Simpson Bowles recommended something like 3-to-1 spending cuts
Sure,
to tax
sure.
increases. Is there any ratio of spending cuts to tax increases that you'd be comfortable with?
Sure. 0 on the tax increase,
Okay,
and the rest over on the, and 100% over the spending. Look, again,
so you
I-
think
Does
it
that
can all
include,
be
you say,
done
is there
through
defense
spending?
spending cuts in your plan?
I'm okay with looking at some of the areas of defense. You would find, and if you check the budgets that I wrote while I was in Congress, you would find that I believe that defense is a top priority of our nation. And you would see that prioritizing in this spending is defense would be the top priority in spending plans that we put together. And when I was in Congress, we got many votes. Remember, it's near impossible for a first-term congressman or a first 2 terms to get 3 budgets actually to the floor for a full-fledged vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. That's what we did. And the reason that happened is because we had a very strong defense number and our spending cuts were elsewhere. And that is not an answer. I would not look at some spending reductions in defense, but it should expect it to be a top priority.
So when former Governor Thompson says he'd cut 5% across all agencies, you think that doesn't make sense?
Well, I'm not gonna question Governor Thompson, but I would say that I think our spending reductions need to be based on priorities. And I think it's reasonable to prioritize and keep the programs that are most important and cut the ones that are most wasteful. And if you look at this program, you would find some of the most wasteful ones, and there's hundreds and hundreds of these programs out there that we just shouldn't be doing. If you're asking me, would I keep defense and cut, I mean, to make it as ridiculous as our government is, the $400,000 that we spent to find out about the effects of cocaine on the sex habits of Japanese quail, I'm keeping defense. You see, I mean, that's a really far-fetched discussion, but that's the kind of discussion I want going on out there. We've got this much money to spend. What is the most important thing that we have to spend that money on? Let's spend it on that and not spend it on something different. And again, I go back to, those are the battles we had when I was there before, and that's how we got the budget balanced. And there were some pretty, if you remember back in those days, there were some pretty tough times back then. Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton did not exactly get along well.
Could you? Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Dan Bice, columnist at the Journal Sentinel. In 2010, anytime your name is brought up this time around, I hear conservatives say that they dislike the way you campaigned in 2010, that you were too aggressive and harsh with Governor Walker. Do you have any regrets about how you campaigned?
Only that hindsight is 20/20, Dan. And if I had known what a great governor Scott Walker was going to be, I would have just stayed home in the first place. So I have a great deal of respect for him. I would remind those folks that are saying that, and I do on a regular basis, that on the night of the primary, we endorsed Scott Walker. I went to the Unity breakfast, and after that, we campaigned with him on a regular basis. We did press conferences with him. We won 44 counties, I believe is the number out of our 72 in the state. We won counties by as much as 25%, where it was Neumann by 25%. The morning after a primary ends, there's 3 things that you can do as a candidate if you've lost. You can pout and stay home. You can do, in all fairness, what some in the media would like you to do, and that's to attack your opponent who just won. Or you can go work with that candidate to make sure that you elect the best person to be your governor, and that's what we chose to do. And we worked all over the state with Scott. You know, look at the vote totals where we won those counties. They were very strong for Scott at the end of the day. So I'm very happy, and we worked very hard for him during his recall as well.
If I could just follow up on that, then what would you say the difference then is between this primary and the primary in 2010?
Well, for one thing, I am totally at home with the discussions we're having. I spent 4 years of my life developing budgets in the United States House of Representatives, and the discussions we're having here today, when you ask me questions that you're asking me about the compromise question, are those questions, I've lived this before. Looking at the state budget, I have to say I was never that comfortable there. I mean, I'm the same conservative person, whether you're talking to me about state or federal, but I am totally at home with these discussions. I don't know if that comes through to you or not, but it really is a comfortable spot as having lived through it for 4 years.
Doesn't it wear you down to lose so many times? I mean, how many times have you lost now?
Well, remember, I've been in one race in the last 14 years. And I think that's something that folks kind of have a tendency to miss. So it's been one race in 14 years. So this is the second one in 14 years. Yeah.
Okay, and 14 years ago you ran against Feingold, so, yeah. I mean, does that, you keep on running. And
Listen, this is America. I mean, one of my idols, if you really study his background and history, it's kind of similar. His name was Abraham Lincoln. Got knocked down multiple times over the course of his life, and he picked himself up and he got going again. And I'm not suggesting I wish to be president. Please don't, I do not. But the concept of looking at someone that I admire and respect in history and understanding that part of what makes America great is that when you get knocked down, you can pick yourself up and get going again. I mean, you all know me from the political world. You know some of our business success. You have no ideas how many times we've been knocked down in the business world. And you just pick yourself up and get going again. That's just all there is to it. This recession has been tough on a lot of people. And whether it's politics or something different, the ones that succeed know how to pick themselves up and get going again and learn and move forward with a positive attitude on what they can do best for themselves, their family, and our country.
I'm Ernie Franz, and I'm the Associate Editorial Page Editor. All four of the candidates talk about repealing the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. How is your stance different from the other three, and what would you do what would you put in its place?
Well, first, how is it different than the other three? From day one, I fought Obamacare. And from day one, we actually collected 25,000 signatures when it was first being discussed that were delivered to various offices around the state. So I've been an active opponent of it from day one. Those 25,000 signatures were a significant amount of work. I will never forget Sue and I going into the governor's mansion with 2 dollies full of signatures, because that's what it is, that's what 25,000 is, and delivering it to Jim Doyle with the request that he allow our Attorney General, of course, to join in the fight to stop Obamacare. So I've been at it since day one on it. I'm totally opposed to Obamacare. I think it needs to be repealed. I think I'm probably the only candidate in the race that is talking about the constitutional question that is brought up by the federal government requiring religious institutions to include abortion-causing drugs in their health care plans and dispensing them from their religious hospitals. And I want to be really clear on what that debate to me is all about. I'm pro-life, and you know I believe life begins at conception. That's what my church believes. So there's no question of where I am. But wherever you're at on the abortion issue, the concept of the federal government coming into a religious organization and telling them what they have to do with something that is part of their religion is just plain fundamentally wrong and in clear violation of the First Amendment to our Constitution.
Now, the Obama administration, Kathleen Sebelius would argue that they have made accommodations that deal with that issue by having the insurance companies pick up the tab for that. You don't buy that?
Well, I'm a business person, and I know that when something's covered, you pay for it. No matter what you say about how it's paid for, there's nothing that's for free. So that I don't buy that it's free and somebody else pays. No, I don't buy that. I don't think there's a business owner in America that would buy that. You also asked the replacement, though, and I think that's an important question. Right. Let me start at the 30,000-foot view of that and then bring it down to some specifics for you. I think the most important thing we need to do is get the federal government out of medicine and allow the patient and the doctor to once again be in charge of what happens in the field of medicine. And once again, we want our doctors practicing based on what they believe in the best interest of the patient. Bringing that down from the 30,000 foot to some specifics. First, I would cap rewards in unintentional malpractice so that our doctors aren't practicing looking over their shoulders expecting a lawsuit. Second, I would allow insurance across state lines. As a business owner, I want to sit down with my employees decide what it is we want in our insurance plan, and then I want to shop and I want to find the most cost-effective way to provide what we decide in our business we want.
On that point, how do you ensure that, as some of the critics have argued, that that could lead to a race to the bottom because of different regulations in different states?
Well, I think what we should do is get those regulations out of the way. I mean, this is a much bigger discussion really than just insurance across state lines. It's really, what is the role of the federal government dictating and mandating to an insurance company what's included, as opposed to me as a business owner sitting down with my employees and deciding what it is we want in our policy. A classic example of that would be and you've seen some Republicans saying that 26-year-old kids on the parents' plan is a really good thing. It is a really good thing. And if I'm willing to pay for it and my employees tell me that that's what we want in our plan and that's part of their overall compensation, more power to them. But the federal government stepping in and mandating that every employer provide that, whether or not it's what his employees and the employer want, that's what I'm opposed to. The third thing, and the most important thing that I would mention in my mind in terms of restoring medicine and restoring our healthcare system, we need to reintroduce the free market system into medicine. And we do that through the expansion and the use of health savings accounts. And I've got experience with this. This is what we do at our company. We provide an insurance plan with a $3,000 deductible to our employees. We then put $3,000 into a savings account on their behalf. And it dramatically changes how medicine and how the medical world works. My employees, since that's their money in their bank account, they ask how much stuff costs. I'll go through one specific example. You just heard this one. I've got more if you want them. But I know of one of our employees, I know for a fact this happened. Now remember, they've got $3,000 in their savings account. They needed an MRI. They asked how much does it cost. The doctor said $1,800. Can I get it done anywhere else? Yes, if you're willing to drive a little bit, you can get it done for $1,200. He told them where. Can I get it done anywhere else? Well, there's a place that's not quite as nice. It's basically a storefront, but they do MRIs and they're the same quality as anywhere else. $600. They wound up getting the MRI. I know for a fact this happened for $600 instead of $1,800. And that's the free market at work in the field of medicine. So get our doctors and patients back in control of what's going on instead of the federal government, and let's instill the free market system by dramatically expanding the use of HSAs.
So even something like pre-existing conditions,
Well,
the federal government should stay out of that too.
Sure, but on the pre-existing conditions, I think that's an important question. So you have a pre-existing condition, you can't buy insurance. To solve that problem, what I would like to see is that we open federal health insurance plans that are used for our federal employees to anybody who would like to sign up for them. So if you have a pre-existing condition, or even if you don't, but you would like to buy the same insurance that our federal employees buy, you can do that. Now you have to, I'm a Republican, you do have to pay for it. Okay, you have to pay for it. But you can have access to that plan. That solves completely the access problem.
What kind of insurance do you have?
United Healthcare. I'm looking at the boss to make sure I'm saying this right.
Do you have a high deductible plan? The same
$3,000.
thing,
Yeah,
the $3,000.
same thing. Yeah.
You mentioned that you want to get the federal government out of healthcare, but how do you accomplish that with Medicare being, what is it, a third of all healthcare spending or something like that? It's a huge amount of spending.
Well, you can't take, I mean, government is going to be in Medicare. That's not an option as far as I'm concerned. I think we need to provide some options to get Medicare costs under control. And I think you need to end Obamacare, because Obamacare took $500 billion out of the Medicare system and it put Medicare in jeopardy. But in terms of Medicare itself, I'd like to see some voluntary opt-out plans be made available to our seniors. And I would start with, I mean, if you want some specific ideas,
Yeah.
I would suggest that the HSA plan for seniors is a possibility. So if you're a healthy 65-year-old person and you want to, you want to have an HSA, so you save some money up for whatever, more power to you.
Did you support the prescription drug plan that was added to Medicare under the Bush administration?
Part D, Medicare.
You did support it?
Medicare Part D, is
Yeah.
that what we're talking about? Okay, I just want to make sure that we're...
Yeah, sure.
The idea of providing for senior citizens in the drugs, the problem with that plan is that they didn't pay for it. So I would not ever support putting a new program into place without a means of paying for the program.
Would you favor rolling that back?
I would favor weighing that against other priorities in the budget, certainly. And when you look at these 150 items, or take 500 items, whatever you want to look at, I think you need a priority debate there, and I think we need to look at ways that anytime you put in a new entitlement program, which is what this was, or an expansion, you've got to have a means to pay for it. We just, as a nation, we just cannot go on doing things that we have no way to pay for.
Granted that you are not coordinating your campaign with any of the work that Club for Growth has been doing, but Club for Growth has been critical of two of your opponents, and it's allowed you to some extent not to be in this as much of a food fight between, as Thompson and Hovde have been in the last week or two. Do you think that that's helped you in the campaign at all in any way, where Club for Growth has been able to use negative advertising and allowed you to some extent not engage in that as much as as Hovde and Thompson?
First of all, thank you so much for noticing. I think you may be the only person in the whole state who noticed. We've not run any commercial that we control on TV or radio for quite some time that is anything but our message. You've seen the kids ad, you've heard about Charlie on the radio, and you're seeing one now that's about Barack Obama's comments about building a business. But to answer your question, and I'm not trying to be, I understand the Club for Growth has endorsed us, and I understand that they are running the other ads. I don't control that in any way, shape, or
And
form.
we understand that.
But I want to go just a step further, though, for you. I think it's the fact that Eric Hovde is attacking so much and has turned this into such a negative campaign that has allowed us to stay positive, more so than it is the Club for Growth. I think it's other groups out there, including the Hovde campaign, that has really put us there. The Hovde ad that's running today about Tommy Thompson's a pretty tough hitting ad. And this other outside group is pretty darn tough hitting too.
So you're fine with the Club for Growth ads?
Fine with them in what respect? I have
Support those ads?
I have nothing to do with
Would you
the
say,
substance.
ask them to stop?
I have nothing to do with what they do, and if I did that, I'd be violating the law, so I can't do that.
You have former employees who work for Club for Growth, right?
There were people that used to work for me many years ago. They're very conservative, as the Club for Growth is very conservative, so that's not.
Well, you kept on saying you had nothing to do with it, but you have some indirect, unofficial ties with the organization, right?
Well, I have friends in a lot of different places, sure. And you guys, I'm not trying to, wait, I do not want to be in a position where I'm trying to say I'm not aware of the fact that Club for Growth is running these ads, and therefore
Right, but you could easily say, without breaking the law, saying you don't approve of some of the ads. I mean, if
Well,
you're trying to
People
say
do that all the time.
I can't be involved with what the club runs. If you're asking me factually, are the ads factually true or not true, I'll let you all debate that. And if they are factually not true, I would be opposed to them. If they are factually true, then I think the exposure of different positions is part of a campaign.
So you said we could decide. What's your impression? Do you think they're generally accurate?
I believe that the ads that I'm seeing on TV, for the most part, I don't like very well, but for the most part are accurate, to answer your question.
So, I was thinking about this, your path to victory is almost Feingold-esque. You let the two people at the top fight, and then you hope to eventually step in there. Is that the way you see it working?
I found an interesting choice of words that I let those two. I have no control of what Tommy Thompson does, and I have no control over what Eric Hovde does. I do control a certain part of this campaign. And the part of the campaign that I control, I know what we're doing with. And we're doing the best we can to do what the people told me to do, and that's run positive commercials. So
if you would win the primary, would you promise that you would run only positive message-focused ads against Tammy Baldwin?
I would certainly promise you that we will run ads that are factually true all the way through. Yes.
That's a little bit different. You were saying that you were so happy that Lee noticed that you've run no negative ads so far.
Well, I am, and I don't want to twist that. I get the rest of the picture, so I'm not trying to push this out of perspective or anything else. But I do know that we had decisions to make in the campaign, and I mean, in all fairness, we can talk about all the rest of that stuff. When we sit down with our team, we do have decisions as to what we're going to do, and we've made decisions as to what we're going to do, and independent of everybody else. We still have internally decisions to make as to what we're going to do.
So
Could you, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, while we're still talking about the horse race in a sense, the Hovde campaign argues in a general election they have the advantage of money. They'll be able to raise money, and the Governor Thompson has the position that his advantage in a general election is his experience and his appeal to moderates. I'm trying to figure out what your what you have to offer in a general election.
I have the biggest advantage of all.
What is that?
I am a conservative through and through. And if you want to fire up the conservative base in the state of Wisconsin in the fall election, Mark Neumann needs to be on the ticket. And I really sincerely mean that. We know that Tammy Baldwin is extremely liberal. I mean, I don't think we get an argument from anybody on that. The very liberal base in Wisconsin is going to be very fired up supporting Tammy Baldwin. And all I've got to say is we'd better have a rock-solid conservative on our ticket in the Senate in order to fire up our base.
Are you saying the other three are not rock-solid conservatives?
I'm saying that we have an opportunity to put the most conservative, and when I say that, don't take my word for it. Take the third-party endorsements across the board of the conservative groups with very few exceptions that are in our camp. And I believe that conservative base will fire up the state of Wisconsin.
One more question on the general election. Often moderates decide who wins.
Mark says confidently, just so.
That's okay. Often moderates or those not particularly aligned with either Republicans or Democrats are the difference in a general election race. How do you appeal to them, independent voters?
Well, first I'd point to Scott Walker's recall re-election. Scott is as conservative as the day is long, as conservative as I am. And he got reelected by a good margin, so I start with that. But I also think that the work that we've done in education is going to be extremely useful in the general election, and it's going to affect a lot of folks. The fact that we've gone to inner cities in multiple spots across America, primarily Milwaukee and Phoenix at this point, but St. Louis is coming soon. And we've located schools next to failing public schools where kids have no chance. And we've spent our time, effort, and resources in developing a school system that's producing results where the kids are now coming out with a solid education that is outperforming their peers across the country, not just inner city kids, but their peers across the country. And I think that we're getting that job done at about half the cost of public education next door. I mean, I think that's going to be very appealing in the general election. Just my background and work in the field of education and the fact that we're able to help poor inner city kids, poor and moderate incomes inner city kids to achieve an education and have hope for the future of their lives. I think that's significant.
Can you give an example of what schools that you work with in Milwaukee
Sure.
that you saw this great turnaround?
Sure. Hope schools are here in Milwaukee. We have 3 of them, and I believe we will open another one next year on, well, don't let me quote a location because I'll probably be wrong, but we'll probably open our 4th one. So Hope Schools in Milwaukee are the schools that I co-founded them about 8 years ago, and I remain co-chair of the board.
Has the graduation rate increased, or what are you citing?
Sure, I'd be happy to get you those statistics if you like. They're actually very fine. We actually have been written up nationally, acclaimed. The author will escape my mind, but he picked 12 elementary schools across America, and he picked ours here in Milwaukee as one of the best. In Phoenix, they have 500 charter schools. We were nominated, one of 3 schools nominated to be the best schools out there. Yeah, this is real. I encourage you to check out our schools. It's worth it. If you have not toured them, I encourage you to tour them. It's something that we should be aware of here in Milwaukee because there's some really good stuff going on.
Could you talk about Medicare? What's your plan for Medicare? How does it relate to Paul Ryan's?
Well, first, I think Paul has drawn attention to the fact that it is not solvent. Medicare is probably the nearest term insolvency of the entitlements. First thing with the Medicare we need to do is get rid of Obamacare because I do not understand how they got away with it, but they got $500 billion out of the Medicare system with the passage of the Obamacare bill. So we got to get rid of that first. But going beyond that, I would like to see some voluntary opt-out programs developed where seniors look at these and go, that are cost-effective, and that seniors look at and go, yes, I'm better off under this program, so therefore I'm going to go do this instead of what I'm currently doing. And I mentioned before, the first place I would go would be offering health savings accounts. Again, I can't emphasize enough, on a voluntary basis, that if somebody wanted to change from the current form into a health savings account, that they'd have that kind of an option.
Ryan's plan also includes premium supports, or what some people term vouchers, for those 55 and under, so there'd be a chance to choose if that was enacted. Do you support that?
Well, on a voluntary basis, would I look at a variety of programs, including Paul Ryan's? Sure. But again, I emphasize on a voluntary basis. I'd like to see a gambit of programs out there that people can select from, and on a voluntary basis choose what they think is best for them. It falls along the lines of personal responsibility, and that's what I would like to see happen.
And back to the question about selling insurance across state lines, again, one of the criticisms is that some states have fairly tough regulation of how insurance can be sold, others less so. Would you see the need for any kind of sort of baseline regulation
From the federal government?
that they would have to, all states would have to adhere to in order to have sales across state lines?
Am I cringing? No.
You are cringing.
No, I am cringing because that's
We're
more,
frowning,
that's
at least.
more, sorry, it's more federal government.
Okay.
I don't want that. I want our employers to have the freedom to purchase what they perceive to be the best plan for their employees.
Who's next? There's a fiscal cliff that we're approaching at the end of the year. Now, you won't be in office if you're elected before that, but what would you do now if you were there? And if nothing happens, what's the remedy?
First off, I suspect the problem will be solved after I am in office because I think they'll probably pass a short-term extension like they typically do. So I would venture a guess that it will be there. What would I do? Again, I go back to it's nice to have spent as much time on this as I've spent on it. There's 6 months into this plan. What we do in our plan is we extend the Bush tax cuts or their equivalent. And I emphasize the or their equivalent part because I think we should overhaul the tax system in general. I think we need to get something simpler, fair, but we cannot afford to be in a situation where the federal government takes more money out of the private sector. So the idea of reaching a point where the Bush tax cuts expire and nothing else happens and all of a sudden the government pulls more money out of the private sector. You want to see a recession go into a depression? Try that. Because when the government takes more money out of the private sector, and I usually do this to a person in the room, I'll do it to Sue because I wouldn't want to pick on any one of you guys. Sue, so next year you've got to pay an extra $5,000 in taxes. So you have $5,000 less money in your checkbook next year. What are you going to do? Save less? Spend less? She's not answering because she's afraid. So, but my point is that if the federal government raises taxes and they have more money in their pocket and we have less, that means whoever it is that's affected by these tax increases is going to save and spend less money. And when they save and spend less money, we should expect to see an economic downturn. That's how it works. And the opposite of that is true. That's how we turn the economy around. When we were in Congress and we cut government spending so that the government quit borrowing the money out of the private sector, we got to a balanced budget, government didn't need to borrow that money anymore, and we cut taxes. There was more money in the private sector, people had more money in their pockets, and again, I would suggest to any one of you at this table, if next year your taxes went down and you had an extra $5,000 in your checkbook, there's only 2 things you can do with that money. You can either spend it or save it and invest it. And either of those 2 lead to economic growth and development. That's how we fixed this mess the last time, and it's how we're going to fix it again, and it's why this kind of plan is so important.
You know, I was just thinking about this, about going back to Governor Walker. Had you been able to see into the future more and realize that he was going to do such a good job, you would have saved millions of dollars 2 years ago in your race. But,
You are trying to make me feel bad today?
well, it was just an observation. But what is it that surprised you about Governor Walker that prompted you to say that? Is it?
Oh, I don't
yes.
think I'm surprised. I think I'm pleased. I think I'm amazed literally amazed at how much he's gotten done in a short period of time.
Is it Act 10, or is there other aspects of it? Or
It's the whole picture. I feel like, look, this year we're going to build 150 homes here in Wisconsin. That's 450 job opportunities here. That's our little tiny company that is bouncing back so strong. And the reason people are buying houses is they believe in Wisconsin again. Property taxes are down. They think Governor Walker's got this state headed in the right direction where jobs are going to be created. There's an attitude out there that we're seeing in our home buyers that we haven't seen in years and years. And I think it's attributable to Scott. And you can call it Act 10, you can call it whatever you want to call it. I think it's the whole picture.
So when there was all that tumult at the Capitol for months, and it seemed like we were a poster child for a dysfunctional government, didn't you have a little bit of a thought like, you know, if that were me, this wouldn't have happened, or something like that?
No, actually it reminded me of my days in Congress when we had people picketing us and shoving us around when we'd come to town hall meetings and everything else. It did. I think it was way worse for them, but I have to say it was the same type of thing that we went through back in the 90s to get us to a balanced federal budget, and I say more power to them.
And you said how many homes that your company is going to build this year?
Probably 150, give or take.
Which
I think
companies are building?
Tim O'Brien Homes and Loose Homes together. That's the 2
Not
companies.
Newman Homes.
There is no Newman Homes, I don't believe.
Anymore.
It's not that I'm aware of.
Okay. but
There
it
may
would
be, I'm
it'd
not
be
that I'm
through-
aware of.
It'd be
so.
through those, Tim,
Yeah, and you guys, the way
Yeah.
we're set up in business,
Yeah.
we got business partners,
Yeah.
my role in the
but
business
it's
is.
those partners, those two guys.
But you are seeing it,
Yeah,
you
we're
are seeing a turnaround in the housing market.
Huge. Mostly, it's the old man got out of the way and let his son and the young guys run the business, but, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Seriously, our companies are they're having a phenomenal year. We do a good job building houses for the people, and people are buying them. And part of that is Scott Walker and the faith in the future of the state, I think.
Do you
We
think
had-
that's
we had
happening
a-
with other companies?
I'm sorry?
Do you think that's happening with other companies
Probably.
like yours?
Yeah, I think we're special because our people are the best and we build the best home, but I'm kidding. But you know what I'm saying?
No, you're not.
But seriously, I would suspect it is happening with other companies.
There's some evidence, though, that businesses in general feel a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now. There was a story just this morning in the New York Times. We did a story recently in our paper. And some of that uncertainty is related to what Ernie was asking about, the fiscal cliff and
I agree with that.
the issue with the Affordable Care Act and so forth. Doesn't that argue for Congress at least beginning to talk about it now? So
Sure.
that so if you were there now, how would you make that happen in this kind of an environment?
I think I'd do what I did when I was there before. I mean, it was, 2 nights a week where I would be down on the floor of the House of Representatives laying out a plan to balance the federal budget. It was a long, hard, consistent fight to get us to a balanced budget. I would be on the floor, and what you would be watching on your TVs, and they watch C-SPAN out there, you would be seeing this chart, then you would be seeing, I know what we'd be doing. We'd be on the floor, you'd be seeing that chart, and I'll just keep going until I find more charts. You'd be seeing my charts and graphs, and you would see me consistently and regularly talking about what we need to do to balance the budget.
But you've talked before about how your plans were not greeted with great acclaim at the time by your colleagues.
Yeah, that's true.
What would change now?
Nothing. I think it'll be the same. And I think it's.
So can you get anything done?
Well, no, wait, the last time we got to a balanced budget.
Okay.
So if we can accomplish the same thing this time, I think it would be very important for the future of this country.
But
So-
do you think the climate is the same? It's much more.
Do you-
It's not exactly the same as it was back then, is it?
Again, I was there every day of the week, so I know just how bad it was out there. And I encourage you to look back in the middle 90s and just how, remember the contract with America? Or the contract on America if you were the other side? And remember Medicare and how they wanted to increase it 14% and we fought for 7%, so we were throwing grandma out in the street? Gosh, I had our pastor take me aside at church one Sunday and he said, "Mark, do you mind waiting?" And this is at my own church. And he said, "I don't know what's going on, but they're convinced that you're taking Medicare away. Can you just tell me what's going on?" It was so bad back then, they were running TV commercials that convinced people in my own church that I was taking Medicare away from our own seniors. We went to, I can tell you spots where it happened, where we literally had campaign staff hurt because it was so rough out on the and I mean physically rough on the campaign trail. I can tell you we were picketed on a regular basis. I can tell you we had to go in different entrances to buildings sometimes because the front was not, we did not perceive it to be safe to go in. I can tell you about bloody raccoons in my mailbox. It was fairly rough time back there. I don't think it's as bad as what Scott Walker had to go through here in Wisconsin, but I think it's the same. I think it's comparable to what we're seeing there right now.
Given
Let's
the
talk about
direct-
the state of the Republican Party for a minute. You look what happened in primaries in Indiana, in Texas. Voters look for fresh new faces. Is that part of the success of Eric Hovde in this race, that he's where he is in the polls?
I think
Before, I hate to interrupt, gentlemen, we have another, something in about 5 minutes, we have to
5 minutes.
take off for us, that's fine.
I think his success is predicated on the amount of money he spent when he was running ads independent of anyone else. And he got to paint a picture that, whether it was him or not, he got to paint the picture. And I think that's what you're seeing right now.
Can we go back to the tax code for a minute? You said you favor reforming the tax code. How would you do that? And what sort of specific carve-outs would you recommend that we do away with in order to bring tax rates lower?
Lots. I think we should get the government out of the business of picking winners and losers. And let me give you the fundamental answer on tax reform.
The home interest credit, would that be on the table?
I don't think you can do that. You destroy your economy. But what I will say on tax reform is that at the end of the day, what I want to know is there more money in the pockets of people, or is there more money in the pocket of government? So when I'm looking at different tax reform plans, take your pick which one. The fundamental first question that you have to get past for me is, at the end of the day, does the government get more money? Because if they do, I don't want to support it. And then beyond that, I'm looking for things that are simpler, flatter, and fairer, and that we get the government out of as much of this as possible, that we close as many of the loopholes as we can, and that we lower our rates across the board, both corporately and personally.
Any specific carve-outs, though, that you'd be willing to share with us that you think should be on the table for discussion?
I've got actually some in here.
Okay.
For example, they've done it now since I wrote this document, but ethanol subsidies, for example, I think should be cut out. A lot of the tax credit stuff that's in here should go away. Across the board, let's get government out, let the free market system work.
You favor lower rates for both individuals and corporations? Okay.
If you win, your past comments about gays and lesbians will come up. I tried very hard 2 years ago to get you to explain, if you still stood by the comments you made to the New York Times in that famous or infamous New York Times Magazine piece, where you said that if you were God, there would be no homosexuality, and 2, you would never hire gays or lesbians. Let's start with the second. Is that still your position, that you would never hire gays or lesbians?
Remind me how I answered you 2 years ago.
I'm not going to tell you.
Seriously, there are laws that govern how you employ people, and I would adhere to the laws of the land as far as how I would employ people.
Have you ever hired a gay or lesbian for your companies?
It would not be appropriate for me to even know that answer, because there are laws in the books that say we cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. But I want to be very clear, and I don't want to go away from this. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and there should be nobody mistaken my position.
Okay, and the other one, what exactly did you mean when you said if you were elected God, there would be no homosexuality?
I don't recall what the exact frame of reference was at the time, but again, I don't mind stating my position. I do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
One other one, jumping back to what James talked about earlier, and that is with the shooting. After the Colorado shooting, it was the day after, or maybe 2 days after, you were in a parade. I saw you with the NRA hat that you were wearing there. I mean, it was a little jarring in that in that context. To me, it was. And then, if you had a parade today where you had to appear, would you wear the same hat today?
I don't know that answer. I never thought about that, to be honest with you, and I guess I never thought about what you're thinking, to be honest with you. I don't know that answer. First off, the NRA is not the problem here. It's the person that went into that church and did the shooting that's the problem. It's not the law that's the problem, because he's clearly in violation of the law. But in terms of would I wear that hat today, in terms of the sensitivity to it, I'd have to think about that. I certainly would not walk away from the NRA on account of what some idiot did, who's clearly off his rocker.
Would things have been better? Some members of the NRA have said that if people had guns in the theater in Colorado, that they could have got to the shooter quicker. Would you support more places where people could carry guns into movie theaters?
Well, I'm certainly in support of concealed carry. I don't know if that's the answer or not. The last thing I want to do is encourage more people to shoot more people. That's the last thing I want to encourage.
Do you ever carry a gun on you?
No, at this point. No, that's not, you're not talking about hunting. I mean, I hunt, I've got all kinds of guns.
His question was concealed carry, and that's why I was following up on.
I just want to make sure I haven't misled you.
No.
I have multiple guns, I hunt a lot.
Let's slip in one foreign policy question. Do you think that the Obama administration has handled the Syrian uprising appropriately?
No.
And what would you have done differently?
I would have spelled out how the uprising in Syria might have an impact on the United States. And I would base my decisions on whether or not we should become involved there on how that uprising may affect the U.S. And I think it's Barack Obama's job to do that, and I don't think he has done that.
Why don't you think he's done it? How do you know he hasn't weighed those options?
I haven't seen him if he has. I mean, I've seen nobody lay out as to what I've seen no discussion whatsoever from Barack Obama that says, here's what's going on in this country, and here's how it affects us here at home. And I would look for that. That's the same with the Iranian discussion, or for that matter, any foreign policy question you're going to ask me. The first thing I ask is, how does it affect us here in America? If I get past that, and it seems like it is going to affect us here in America, and we want to consider some sort of action, the next question I would ask is, okay, We think it's going to impact our people here at home. We maybe need to do something. I then want to know what the plan is and what the cost of that plan is in terms of dollars and human lives. And the third thing I want, and this is perhaps the most important thing of all, I want to know how to measure success. I want to know what success looks like so that when we achieve success, we know enough to come home. And those fundamental principles of foreign policy are not being followed today by our White House.
Was it followed in the previous administration?
I was going to add, I'm not sure they've been followed all the way through. So this is a criticism that I would level at both Republicans and Democrats as it relates to foreign policy.
You
And I
think the
it's
same
important.
is true with the situation in Libya last year?
Sure, yes. And Iran, too.
If you lose this time, should we expect to see you again in 2 or 4 years, or would this be it?
I don't know. Like I said, this is the second race in 14 years, so the
you'll be back.
Lord guides me from day to day, and I'd sure hate to tell you what He has in store for my future.
That sounds like you're going to be back.
I say that, and people don't believe me. I honestly believe that. I honestly believe that the Lord has a plan for our lives, and that we'll let it unfold the way He sees fit. I'll get up every morning, do the best I can to employ people and create more jobs, and see where the road leads.
So was losing in 2010 part of the plan?
Apparently.
Mark Neumann, thanks a lot for being with us.
You bet.
Thank you very much.